Just a quick warning, some of the images displayed in this video may be disturbing to some viewers. If you haven't noticed by now, the mainstream media are not interested in telling you the truth. In fact, they make a concerted effort to dance around the truth and hide it from you. I want to draw your attention to a story from New Year's Eve, where a family, including a grandmother and her daughters, were out enjoying their night when at about 2 AM, disaster struck. All of a sudden, a group of 3 youths felt the need to savagely beat the family completely unprovoked, leaving the grandmother, Karen Bland, in a hospital bed. And I quote, "We couldn't defend ourselves. There was nothing we could do. We were at their mercy. They were ruthless and relentless. They didn't care about us as much as possible. That was their intention. I started begging him, please stop. Please don't hurt my grandson. And he laughed in my face." This is the entire article in Fairfax owned WA Today. A Perth grandmother has suffered bleeding on the brain after being attacked along with 6 members of her family in Perth. The family was headed home after New Year's Eve celebrations about 2 AM when a group of men started punching and kicking Karen Bland and her family members, 9 News Perth has reported. 3 of the family were hospitalised, including Karen Bland and her 26-year-old daughter. He pulled his fist back and he hit her as hard as he could, like a man, and then she fell back into this pot plant, and then he just held her clothes and kept punching. I couldn't do anything. We were at their mercy, and they were ruthless and relentless. One of the group also punched a police officer in the face. One 26-year-old man was later found and charged for assaulting a public officer, but Perth detectives are still looking for 3 more men. I know what you're thinking. That's a horrible thing, but where is a description of the attackers? Surely the media would want to give us a description to help inform the public and to assist us in avoiding these savage individuals in the future. Nor did Channel 9 News, who broke the story, mention any description of the attackers or even get a description from the victim. Not even the supposed far-right Daily Mail gave us a description of the attackers. Sadly, this is how our media operates in the current year.
Because it's 2015.
With not much else to go on, it isn't a good idea to simply make assumptions. But, as the saying goes, the longer they wait to give you a description of the attackers, the more likely it is that they're not white. So, I simply waited for the truth to come out, and was eventually tipped off to a video made by a Perth man called Dennis Hutz.
Pretty heart-wrenching stuff, isn't it? Now, as I said, I have been able to locate these people, and I spoke to one of the victims. I asked them to speak to me on camera, but they didn't want to do it. They are extremely fearful for their safety and any repercussions that might come if they should have done that. But they talked to me off video and told me that the attackers were in fact a group of men fitting an African description. They also told me that when they were being interviewed by the media, they were constantly told not to make reference to the fact that the attackers were of African appearance. Now, I was actually in the city on New Year's Eve. For anyone who knows anything about Perth, is Sudanese youth gangs congregate out the front of HJ's and KFC in the city on William Street, just near the Hay Street Mall. It's turned into a real no-go zone there for a lot of people. And I saw them standing on the corners there, harassing people as they were walking past.
Surprise, surprise, not only were the attackers African, but the media actually went out of their way to hide this fact from us. What possible motivation would the media have for hiding this highly relevant fact from us? Surely the public has a right to know who is committing the crime, and surely it is the job of the media to inform the public of all the facts. What do you think would happen if the attackers were white and the victims were of African descent, or any other non-white race for that matter? Ha! Yeah, that's a joke question. We all know exactly what would happen. It would be headline news around the country. The attackers would be named and shamed, with their faces plastered across every newspaper. You see, according to the establishment, racism is only bad when whites do it, while racism against whites is something to be hidden or laughed at in some instances. It's something the public don't deserve to know, because we are just too incapable of handling the facts without wanting to do something about it. Sudanese are only about 0.1% of Australia's population, yet they commit around 1.1% of total crime, meaning they are 11 times more likely to commit crime than the general population. When it comes to violent crimes, they are even more overrepresented. I've made a full video on this fact, and I'll link in the description. The ruling class are now desperate to hide the truth about multiculturalism and the effect it has on our society. They are even going out of their way to stop victims of brutal bashings from telling the truth. Worse still, the country now faces the very real prospect of a far-left socialist government who want to open the borders even further, and I quote, Opposition leader Bill Shorten has pledged a Labor government would massively increase Australia's funding to the United Nations for regional refugee programs and lift the annual refugee intake, in a compromise deal that avoided a major stoush over asylum seekers at the party's national conference. Mr. Shorten said he wanted to rekindle Australia's reputation as a good international citizen when it came to refugees, but not at the expense of restarting the people smuggling trade. In an agreement reached behind the scenes, Mr. Shorten announced a Labor government would quadruple funding to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and boost the annual refugee intake by lifting the number of community-sponsored places. Australia currently gives $25 million a year to the UN Refugee Agency. Labor would lift this to $100 million a year, or $500 million in the first 5 years of a Shorten government. Mr. Shorten confirmed he would increase the annual refugee intake to a total of 32,000 people, as the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age revealed on Sunday. This increase would occur through expanding the community sponsorship program, wherein businesses, communities and unions sponsor refugee places in Australia. Labor would increase this program from 1,000 to 5,000 places over time. Labor also affirmed its existing policy to increase the government-funded refugee intake to 27,000 from 18,750 by 2025. It did not put a time frame on increasing the community-sponsored program. If that doesn't send shivers down your spine and make your blood boil, then you haven't been paying attention. Not only does a Bill Shorten government mean we edge closer towards socialist hell, it will mean more terrorist attacks, more African crime, and more suppression of free speech. The ALP will not tolerate dissent. It is now clear that a vote for the Australian Labor Party is a vote against your own country. It's now best to vote for minor parties and put all of the majors last. What this story tells us quite clearly is that our media are not interested in reporting the truth as accurately as they can. They are far more concerned with pushing a narrative, or, in this case, hiding facts that hurt their narrative. That narrative being Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world. If this is success, then God help us if it ever fails. But I suspect that's the long-term goal of the ruling class anyway. You see, South Africa isn't just a warning for white people everywhere. It is their template for the future of Western civilization. If you are white, they want you gone. You cannot trust anything that comes from the mouths of the ruling class. The media, politicians, academia, and big business are all in an unholy alliance against all the peoples of this world and are desperate to keep their power and wealth intact at all costs. They are actively working against your interests, and it's now painfully obvious to anyone who has their eyes open. In the meantime, innocent Australians will continue to suffer at the hands of these violent foreigners for no other reason than the ruling class simply refuse to do anything about it. Thanks for watching, share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.